Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hello, outstanding people. Let's do this a little bit lower. See. Hello, beautiful, outstanding people. Thomas in York. This is my podcast version within Thomas in York, because our roots are true crime, famous graves. I focus in and around, the New York City, New York area, New Jersey, Connecticut, but there are, crime tales stories that I just know by where I am. I would never get to cover, never get to go to those areas as of now. So I just want to cover them in audio form. These are, stories and tales that you might have or might not have heard. If you haven't heard, come back to here for future reference, right? Um, so I just really wanted to go over and kind of explore the life today of Bonnie and Clyde, who are, you know, uh, how would I describe it? Maybe folklore, myth, legend. There's a lot of unknowns in regards to Bonnie and Clyde. So I just want to speak on them in a little bit. And please do like and subscribe. Um, again, a lot of true crime, a lot of pop culture on my channel, so it's all there. Bonnie Elizabeth Parker. She was born October 1st, 1910, Wawena, Texas. She was the second of three children. Her father was Charles Robert Parker. He was a bricklayer who had died when she was just 4 years old. Her widowed mother, Emma Krause Parker, moved her family back to her parents' home in Cement City, which was an industrial suburb in West Dallas, where she worked as a seamstress. As an adult, Parker wrote poems such as The Story of Suicide Sal and The Trial's End. The latter were commonly known as the story of Bonnie and Clyde. Parker was a bright child. She thrived on attention. She enjoyed performing on stage and dreamt of becoming an actress. In her second year of high school, Parker met an individual by the name of Roy Thornton. The couple dropped out of school and married on September 25th, 1926, 6 days before her 16th birthday. Imagine that. The marriage was marred by his frequent absence. It was marred, rather, by his frequent absences and brushes with law, and it proved to be short lived. They never divorced, however, but their paths never crossed again after January of 1929. When she died, Parker was still wearing the wedding ring Thornton had given her. Thornton was in prison when he heard of her death, commenting, "I'm glad they jumped out like they did. It's much better than being caught." Sentenced to 5 years for robbery in 1933, and after attempting several prison breaks from other facilities, Thornton was killed while trying to escape from Huntsville State Prison, October 3rd of 1937. After she left Thornton, Parker moved back in with her mother, and she worked as a waitress in Dallas. One of her regular customers was postal worker Ted Hinton. In 1932, he had joined the Dallas County Sheriff's Department and eventually served as a member of the posse. That, well, in regards to Bonnie and Clyde, you will soon find out what happened. Parker briefly kept a diary early in 1929 when she was aged 18, writing of her loneliness, her impatience with life in Dallas, and her life of photography. Now, Clyde Barrow was born on March 24th, 1909, poor farming family in the town of Tellico, Texas, which was near Dallas. Now, he was the fifth of seven children of Henry Basil Barrow and Cumi Talita Walker. The family moved to Dallas in the early 1920s as part of a wider migration pattern from rural areas to the city, where many settled in the urban slum of West Dallas. The Barrows spent their first months there living under their wagon until they got enough money to buy a tent. Barrow was first arrested in late 1926 at the age of 17 after running when police confronted him over a rental car that he had failed to return on time. They had rental cars back then? My God. All right, his second arrest was with his brother Buck Barrow soon after for possession of stolen turkeys. Stolen turkeys. Stolen turkeys, my God. Barrow had some legitimate jobs from 1927 through 1929. See, he was on a roll there, folks. But he also cracked safes, robbed stores, and engaged in auto theft. He met 19-year-old Parker through a mutual friend in January of 1930. I guess the rest is history, as they say, right? And they spent much time together during the following weeks. Their romance was interrupted when Barrow was arrested and convicted of auto theft. Barrow, he had escaped from the McLennan County Jail in Waco, Texas on March 11th, 1930, using a gun Parker had smuggled into jail. It already starts, as you can see. He was recaptured March 18th, and Barrow was sent to the Huntsville State Prison in April of 1930, and in September he was assigned to Eastham Prison Farm at the age of 21. Apparently he was sexually assaulted while in prison, and he retaliated by attacking and killing his tormentor with a pipe, crushing his skull. This was his first kind of end of life. Another inmate who was already serving a life sentence, well, he had claimed responsibility. Now, to avoid hard labor in the fields, Barrow purposely had two of his toes amputated, my gosh, in late 1932 by another inmate or by himself. Because of this, he walked with a limp for the rest of his life. The amputation slowed him down physically, making it harder to outrun law enforcement and limiting his mobility during his many robberies. However, without his knowledge, his mother had successfully petitioned for his release, and he was set free 6 days after his intentional injury. Darn it, had he just waited, that impatient Clyde, huh? He was paroled from Eastham in February of 1932, and now at this point he was a hardened and bitter criminal. Sister Marie said, was recorded in papers, something awful sure must have happened to him in prison, because he wasn't the same person when he got out. A fellow inmate at the time by the name of Ralph Fultz said that he watched Clyde changed from a schoolboy to a rattlesnake. Now, I don't know if you go into prison how you are a schoolboy, perhaps, right? But nonetheless, apparently he was a schoolboy. We'll take it from that. Now, in his post East Ham career, Barrow, well, he was still the same. Pardon. Thirsty. Stay hydrated, folks. Now, when I say Barrow, remember that is Clyde. Let me just say Clyde now. Clyde, he robbed grocery stores and gas stations at a rate far outpassing the 10 or so bank robberies attributed to him and the Barrow Gang. His favorite weapon was the M1918 Browning automatic rifle. According to John Neal Phillips, Barrow's goal in life was not to gain fame or the fortune from robbing banks, but to seek revenge against the Texas prison system for the abuses that he feels that he has sustained while serving time. Now, there are, as far as the first meeting, there's several different accounts of Bonnie and Clyde's first meeting. I think one of the more credible versions is that they met in January of 1930 at the home of Clyde's friend, Clarence Clay, in West Dallas. Barrow was 20 years old at the time, and Bonnie Parker, she was 19. Parker was out of work, and she was staying with a female friend to assist her during her recovery from a broken arm. Barrow was dropped by the girl's house while Parker was in the kitchen making hot chocolate. There you have it. The love story of Bonnie and Clyde and how they first met. Early robberies. Um, geez, here, let me show you. This is from Wikipedia. This is Bonnie posing with a cigarette and a pistol. I am. I'm not gonna. That's on Wikipedia. I'm not gonna lie. That does kind of look badass, right? Um, but after Clyde's release from prison in 1932, he and Fultz began a series of robberies. There were stores and gas stations. Their goal was to collect enough money and firepower to launch a raid against East Ham Prison Farm. April 19th, Parker and Fultz were captured in a failed hardware store burglary in Kaufman in which they had intended to steal firearms. Parker was released from jail after a few months when the grand jury failed to indict her. Fultz was convicted. He was tried, convicted, and served time. He never rejoined the gang. Parker wrote poetry to pass the time in Kaufman County Jail, and we united with Clyde Barrow within a few weeks of her release. Just a couple of weeks later, mere few weeks later, April 30th, Clyde Barrow was the getaway driver in a robbery in Hillsboro, Texas, during which store owner J.N. Butcher he perished. Butcher's wife identified Clyde Barrow from police photographs as one of the shooters, although he stayed inside the car. August 5th, Clyde Barrow, Raymond Hamilton, and Ross Dyer were drinking moonshine, man, at a country dance in Oklahoma when a sheriff by the name of C.J. Maxwell and Deputy Eugene Moore approached them in the parking lot. They were known. They were wanted. Barrow and Hamilton opened fire, and Moore and perished, and it gravely wounded Maxwell. Moore was the first outlaw whom Barrow and his group of posse there they had, and whose life was ended. They eventually ended lives of 9 people. On October 11th, they allegedly ended the life of Howard Hall at his store during a robbery in Sherman, Texas, although some historians they consider this unlikely. So if you're following now, Clyde, is just fierce, seems to be more focused, unfortunately, and he's just taken lives. The number went up to 9. W.D. Jones had been a friend of Clyde Barrow's family since childhood. He joined Parker and Barrow on Christmas Eve of 1932 at the age of 16, and the 3 left Dallas that night. So it's W.D. Jones and Clyde and Bonnie Parker, Clyde Barrow, and they had left Dallas on Christmas Eve. The next day, Jones and Barrow ended the life of Doyle Johnson, a young family man, while stealing his car. Clyde, he had ended the life of Tarrant County Deputy Malcolm Davis on January 6th of 1933, when he, Parker, and Jones wandered into a police trap set for another criminal. This group had now ended the lives of 5 people since April. Excuse me. Very thirsty. Thirsty. Sponsored by Lipton Iced Tea. Not really. March 22nd, 1933. Clyde's brother Buck was granted a full pardon and released from prison, and he and his wife, Blanche, set up housekeeping with Bonnie, Clyde, and Jones in a temporary hideout in Joplin, Missouri. Now, according to family sources, Buck and Blanche were there to visit. They apparently attempted to persuade Bonnie to surrender to law enforcement. The group ran loud, alcohol feud, card games into the night in a quiet neighborhood. Lance recalled that they brought a case of beer a day. The men came and went noisily at all hours, and Clyde accidentally fired. I don't know how you accidentally fire, but nonetheless, he accidentally fired a Browning automatic rifle in the apartment while cleaning it. No neighbors went to the house, but one reported suspicions to the Joplin Police Department. Now, the Joplin police assembled a 5-man force in 2 cars on April 13th to confront what they suspected were bootleggers living at a Oak Ridge Drive address. The Barrow brothers and Jones, they opened fire, ending the life of Detective Harry McGinnis outright and injuring, fatally wounding Constable J.W. Harriman. Parker, well, she opened fire with a bar as the others fled, forcing Missouri Highway Patrol Sergeant Holler to duck behind a large oak tree. Now, the 30 caliber bullets from the BAR struck the trees and blasted wood splinters into the sergeant's face. Parker got into the car with the others, and they pulled in Blanche from the street where she was pursuing her dog, Snowball. The surviving officers later testified that they had fired only 14 rounds in the conflict. 14 rounds. One hit Jones on the side, one struck Clyde, but was reflected by his suit coat button, and one grazed Buck after ricocheting off of a wall. It's a wild story. Wild story. The group had escaped Joplin police, but they had left behind most of their possessions at the apartment, including Buck's parole papers, 3 weeks old, a large arsenal of weapons, a handwritten poem by Bonnie, and a camera with 7 rolls of undeveloped film. Police developed the film at Joplin Globe and found many photos of Barrow, Parker, and Jones posing rather, and pointing weapons at one another. The Globe sent the poem and the photos over the newswire, including a photo of Parker clenching a cigar in her teeth and a pistol in her hand. The Barrow Gang subsequently became a front newspaper cell throughout the United States. Now, that photo of Parker posing with a cigar and a gun became popular. In a book, it's called Go Down Together, the true untold story of Bonnie and Clyde. A writer by the name of Jeff Quinn noted John Dillinger had Mantine idol good looks, and Pretty Boy Floyd had the best possible nickname. But the Joplin pictures introduced new criminal superstars with the most titillating trademark of all, illicit sex. Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker were wild and young and had undoubtedly slept together. Allegedly. This is a crazy duo. The group had ranged from Texas as far north as Minnesota for the next 3 months. In May, they had tried to rob a bank in Indiana, and robbed the bank in Acabina, Minnesota. They kidnapped 2 people by the name of Dillard Darby and Sophia Stone at Louisiana in the course of stealing Darby's car. This was one of the several events between 1932 and 1934 in which they had kidnapped either police officers or robbery victims. They usually released their hostages far from home, sometimes even with money to help them return. Ah, nice criminals, right? Um, Stories of such encounters, well, they had made headlines, as did the more violent episodes. The Barrow Gang did not hesitate uh, in, shooting anyone who got in their way, whether it was a police officer or innocent civilian. They did not care. Other members of the group who had committed violent acts included Hamilton, Jones, Buck Barrow, and Henry Meffin. Eventually, the cold bloodiness of their murders opened the public's eyes to the reality of their crimes and led to their end, I would say. I want to show you a picture of Clyde. I think let's see if you could see pictures of Clyde here. Nope. It's not him. Bear with me 1 second. Let's see. You can see that's Clyde, obviously, the man there. So yeah, the Barrow gang became front page news. Front page news. So they resorted to you know campfire on they have this notoriety, and now they're trying to evade discovery, and they're forced to kind of, as we move the story along, they're first forced to be by the campfires, camping in the woods, and they're taking showers in cold streams. Not the greatest of living conditions now, right? So being notarized, being known for what you are, you're kind of trying to hide that way you don't get caught up with. I'm gonna hold pause the story right back, folks. Let me get a refreshment. Obviously, we try to be professional here, but sometimes when nature calls, nature calls. Let's pick up the story. So, pick up the story where Barrow Clyde, he failed to see the warning signs at a bridge under construction on June 10th while driving with Jones and Parker near Wellington, Texas, and the car had slipped into a ravine. Now, sources disagree on whether there was a gasoline fire or if Parker was doused with acid from the car's battery under the floorboards, but she sustained third-degree burns to her thigh and her leg, so severe that the muscles contracted and caused the leg to draw up. They're on the run, remember. Jones observed, she'd been burned so bad, none of us thought she was going to live. The hide on her right leg was gone from her hip down to her ankle. I could see the bone at places. Now, Parker, she could barely walk, hardly walk. She either hopped on her good leg or was carried by Barrel. They got help from a nearby farm family, then kidnapped Collinsworth County Sheriff George Corey and City Marshal Paul Hardy, leaving the two of them handcuffed to a tree outside of um, Eric, Oklahoma. The three rendezvoused with Buck and Blanche and hid in a tourist port near Fort Smith, Arkansas, nursing Parker's burns. Buck and Jones had bludgeoned a. Let's rephrase that. They didn't bludgeon, they boggled a rob. They messed up on the robbery. It didn't go as they had planned, and he ended the life of, unfortunately, Town Marshal Henry Humphrey in Alma, Arkansas. Now, once again, despite the grave condition of Bonnie, they were forced to flee yet again. So they're committing all these crimes. If you're keeping track, and the three of them are just trying to, stay one, stay, ahead of the police. We jump into um, having an idea here. We're going into Platte City, July 1933. The gang checked into a Red Crown tourist court south of Platte City. That was in Missouri. It consisted of two brick cabins joined by garages, and the gang rented both. To the south stood the Red Crown Tavern, which was a popular restaurant among Missouri highway patrolmen, and the gang seemed to go out of their way to draw attention. Blanche registered the party as 3 guests, but owner Neil Hauser could see 5 people getting out of the car. He noted that the driver backed into the garage gangster style for a quick getaway. So the car was positioned a certain way. That way, you're able to maneuver it out quickly in case you needed to go quickly. Blanche had paid for their cabins with coins rather than bills and did the same later when buying 5 dinners and 5 beers. Now, the next day, Hauser noticed that his guests had taped newspapers over the windows, over, rather over the windows of their cabin. Blanche again paid for 5 meals with coins. Her outfit um, also attracted attention. They were not typical attire for women in the area, and eyewitnesses still remembered them 40 years later. Hauser told Captain William Baxter of the Highway Patrol, patron of his restaurant, about the group. Barrow and Jones went into town to purchase badges, crackers, cheese, and some type of medicine to try to help treat Bonnie's leg, who's still injured. The druggist had contacted the sheriff, Holt Coffey, who put the cabins under surveillance. They're hot on their trail, right? The druggist um, and brother Coffey had been alerted by Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas law enforcements to watch for strangers seeking such supplies. The sheriff contacted Captain Baxter, who called for reinforcements from Kansas City, including a armored car. Sheriff Coffey led a group of officers towards the cabins at 11 p.m. on July 20th, 1933, with Thompson's submachine weapons. And there was a gunfight that ensued. The gunfight ensued, and the Barrows managed to escape in their vehicle. And for whatever reason, they did not pursue the vehicle. Once again, they had evaded uh, law, but Buck had been wounded by a bullet that blasted a large hole in the bone of his forehead and had exposed his injured brain. My goodness. Wow. Blanche was also nearly blinded by glass fragments. So this group now is completely injured, right? So much so you might consider them mortally injured. How much longer are they going to be able to try to keep eluding arrests and burglaries? Wow. We go to Dexfield Park, the next scene. Now, the Barrow Gang camped at Dexfield Park, which was an abandoned amusement park near Dexter, Iowa, July 24th of 1933. Bonnie was sometimes semi-conscious, and Buck rather was sometimes semi-conscious, and he even talked and ate, but his massive head wound and loss of blood was so severe that Barrow and Jones dug a grave for him. Residents noted their bloodied bandages, and local police determined that the campers were the Barrows gang. Police and approximately 100 spectators surrounded the group, and the Barrows soon came under fire. Barrow, Parker, and Jones had escaped on foot. Buck was shot in the back, and he and his wife were captured by police. Buck, well, he had succumbed to his head wound and pneumonia after surgery 5 days at the King's Daughters Hospital in Perry, Iowa. Now, for the next 6 weeks, the remaining perpetrators, they had ranged far afield from the usual area of operations. West to Colorado, north to Minnesota, southeast to Mississippi, yet they continued to commit these armed robberies. They restocked their arsenal when Barrow and Jones had robbed an armory on August 20th, firing 3 BARs. Those were handguns. And they had also acquired a large quantity of ammunition. By early September, the gang risked a run to Dallas to see their families for the first time in 4 months. They were homesick. Jones parted company with them, continuing to Houston, where his mother had moved. He was there. He was arrested there without incident on November 16th and returned to Dallas. Though, through autumn, Barrow committed several robberies with small-time local accomplices, while his family and Peters and Parker attended to her considerable medical needs. November 22nd, Barrow and Parker narrowly evaded arrest when trying to meet with family members near Sarahs, Texas. Narrow escape. Narrow escape. However, November of 28th, Dallas grand jury delivered a murder indictment against Parker and Barrow for the killing in January of that year, nearly 10 months earlier, of the county deputy Malcolm Davis. Now, in actuality, and it was, Parker's first warrant for murder. So everything is caving in on Bonnie and Clyde, as we see. Now, January 1934, Clyde Barrow orchestrated the escape of individuals by the name of Hamilton, Melvin, and several others in East Ham breakout. It was a brazen raid generated. The raid generated negative publicity for Texas, and Clyde seemed to have achieved what historian Phillips suggested was his overachieving goal, which was revenge on Texas Department of Corrections. Barrow gang member by the name of Joan Palmer, ended the life of Joe Carlson during his escape, and Carlson died a few days later in the hospital. This attack attracted the full power of the Texas and federal government to manhunt for Barrow and Parker, As Crossan struggled for life, prison chief Lee Simmons reportedly promised him that all persons involved in the breakout will be hunted down and killed. All of them were eventually for Methvin, except for Methvin, rather, who preserved his life by turning it on the gang and setting up the ambush of Barrow and Parker. That's right. There was a ambush. By May of 1934, Barrow had, at this point, Clyde had 16 warrants outstanding against him for multiple counts of robbery, auto theft, escape, assault, and murder in first states. Hammer, who had already begun tracking the gang on February 12th, led a posse composed of 6 men. Now, Hammer had studied the gang's movements and found that they swung in a circle skirting the edges of 5 Midwestern states, exploiting the state line rule that had prevented officers from pursuing a fugitive into another jurisdiction. Clyde Barrow, he was consistent in his movements, so Hammer charted his path and predicted, where he would go, or where he would go. The gang's itinerary centered on family visits, and they were due to see Methvin's family in Louisiana. Unbeknownst to Hammer, Barrow had designated Methvin's parents' residence as kind of a place to stay in case they were separated. Methvin had begun separated from the rest of the gang in Louisiana. May 21st, the 4 posse members from Texas were in Shreveport when they learned that Barrow and Parker were planning to visit Methvin's father in Beanville Parish that evening. The full posse set up an ambush along Louisiana State Highway 154 south of Gibbsland towards Sales. Hinton recounted that the lawmen were in place by 9 p.m. and waited through the whole of the next day with no sign of the perpetrators. Other accounts said that the officers set up on May 22nd, so, the line gets a little blurry. But approximately at 9:15 on April 23rd, the posse members were still concealed in the bushes. They were waiting for someone. Guess who it was? They heard a vehicle approaching at high speed. In their official report, they stated that they had persuaded Methvin to position his truck on a shoulder of the road that morning. By doing that, they hoped that Barrow would stop to speak with him. Now, the vehicle proved to be the Ford V8 with Barrow at the wheel, and he slowed down as he had hoped. The city lawman opened fire while the vehicle was still moving. Oakley, an individual by the name of Oakley, had fired first, probably before any order to do so. Barrow was shot in the head, and he died instantly from Oakley's first bullet. But Hinton reported hearing Parker scream. The officers filed about. It came out to about 130 rounds overall, emptying their guns, and any number of the wounds Barrow and Parker suffered would have been fatal. The gunfire was allegedly so loud that the posse were temporarily deaf all afternoon. Come to a head, right? All came to a head. Man. What sometimes goes to people's heads, right? Now, let's see where we were. So Barrow was injured. He died instantly from the first bullet. There were 130 rounds fired overall. 130. Barrow and Parker, they had wished to be buried side by side, but the Parker family would not allow it. Her mother wanted to grant her final wish to be brought home, but the mob surrounding the Parker house made it impossible. More than 20,000 people attended Parker's funeral, and her family had difficulty reaching her gravesite. Her services were held on May 26th. Allen, an individual by the name of Alan Campbell, had recalled that the flowers came from everywhere, including some with cards from allegedly from Pretty Boy Floyd and John Dillinger. The largest floral tribute was sent by a group of Dallas City newsboys. The, su- the sudden end of Bonnie and Clyde sold 500 newspapers in the Dallas area alone. Bonnie Parker was buried in Phil's Trap Cemetery before her body was moved to the new Crown Hill Cemetery in Dallas. Thousands of people had gathered outside both Dallas funeral homes, hoping for a chance to view their bodies. Barrow's private funeral rather, was held at sunset. He was buried in Western Heights Cemetery in Dallas next to his brother Marvin. The Barrow brothers share a single granite marker with their names on it and the epithet selected by Clyde that simply states, "Gone but not forgotten." The case that still gets talked about, right? The American National Insurance Company of Galveston, Texas, now check this out, paid the life insurance policies in full on Barrow, Clyde, and Bonnie Parker. Since then, the policy of the payouts has changed to exclude payouts in cases of deaths caused by any criminal act by the insured. The six men of the posse were to split the reward money in six ways. Now, in closing, as I'm kind of wrapping this up here, reading here, wow. Summer of 1934. New federal statutes made bank robbery and kidnapping federal offenses. This, coupled with the growing coordination of local authorities by the FBI and the introduction of two-way radios in police cars, made it much more difficult to rob and end the life than it had been just weeks before. Law enforcement the ended the life of Dillinger 2 months after ending the life of Clyde and Bonnie. Wow. All in all, Bonnie and Clyde had ended the life of 12 people, including 9 law enforcement officers during their 2 years of criminal activity. 9. Now, the posse who had captured Bonnie and Clyde, and they never received the promised bounty, because there was a bounty on Bonnie and Clyde. Now, they never received uh, the bounty. So they were told to take whatever they wanted to from the confiscated items in their car. So Hamner had appropriated the arsenal of stolen weapons and ammunition, plus a box of fishing tackle under the terms of his compensation package with the Texas DOC. Okay. Man, you also have, or you've seen many of times, um, Bonnie and Clyde's, quote unquote, the death car that's been on display. I am sure it is not written. Safe to say. Well, what a case. You know, a span of one of the most elusive criminals was so elusive that they had to be captured by a special group of people. And Bonnie and Clyde had a bounty on on their head, and they tried to elude captivity, but eventually it all fell apart because they were all, getting hurt, right? So, just wanted to share that story with you. Kind of summed it up there towards the end, as there's a lot more, obviously, to get into. But that was the gist of the story. Um, it's a story that's been covered a gazillion times. You have many documentaries about that, but that was the life of Bonnie and Clyde on the Thomas in New York YouTube channel. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you will be notified when you have more crime tales coming out live, along with videos being uploaded. There are a couple of videos coming down the pike here. Is that the word I'm looking for? Coming down the barrel. So hope all is well. I must bid you adieu. Thomas